President and CEO of the Batavia Chamber. We're so happy to have you here this morning talking about this important topic, mental health trends in the workplace. There is coffee and donuts, so help yourself. Please put a name badge on. We have a facilitator here this morning, Austin Gray, who is going to facilitate this topic with our presenters, Dr. Jessica Swenson, Ashley Patterson, Angela McLaughlin, and Ryan Johnson, all experts in the field of mental health. So I want to turn it over to Austin. Thank you for hosting this for us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for introducing us. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this important panel discussion on mental health, neurodiversity, and fostering supportive workplaces. I'm Austin, and I'll be your moderator today. Here's how today's discussion will go. First, I'll invite Jessica, our CEO, to share a few words about the company and why this topic matters. Then I'll introduce our panelists and move into the discussion. Each panelist will answer 2 questions. After the first round, I'll summarize the key points before moving into the second round. We'll wrap up with a Q&A session, so feel free to jot down questions for the panelists. Let's get started. I'll hand it over to you, Jessica.
Great, thanks so much, Austin. So I think one of the reasons this is such an important topic, and one of the reasons that we're doing this, is that regardless of whatever is changing in our government or administration, the thing is that mental health and neurodivergence is not going anywhere. These are health conditions, they are not trends. And so how it affects the workplace becomes a trend, but how it affects people is very much mental and neurological. So one of the things that, when you think about these things in the workplace is what will we start to do to support people? Because the supporting of people with these types of issues is very important, because without that, you're looking at corporate waste, retraining people, having people leave because there's not a tolerance or a support system in place for something like a repetitive behavior, right? So really this is more about how can a workplace, a school, or any institution really start to identify, support, and monitor people in the workplace that you want to keep, that are really valuable to you, but something's preventing them from being as productive as they could.
Thank you, Jessica. Now let's meet our panelists. We'll start with Angie.
Hi, I'm Angie McLaughlin, and I am a social media strategist. I'm going to try and turn on the microphone.
I think that might be on.
Ashley.
Sorry about that. It goes to the left.
I'm Ashley Patterson. I'm a clinical therapist and strategic advisor.
Ryan.
My name is Ryan. I'm a clinical intern with Transformative Growth.
Thank you all for being here. Let's dive into the discussion. Ashley, I'll begin with you. What is the difference between being neurodivergent and having a mental health condition?
So that's a great question, Austin. And there are a lot of symptom overlap. I don't know if you guys were able to grab, we have a packet over there, and I think on page 2 of the packet, it kind of discusses how many of the symptoms with mental health, like trauma and bipolar, can overlap with neurodivergence. But the key difference is really that someone that's neurodivergent, they're born neurodivergent, whereas somebody with a mental health disorder, that's typically developed through life experience, and it's also episodic, where it comes and goes. Someone that's neurodivergent, that's a constant state. That's not going to change.
That was a really insightful breakdown, Ashley. That distinction really helps us understand how workplaces can better support individuals by addressing both neurodivergence and mental health challenges. Now, Angie, let's build on the idea of workplace support. What specific training or resources can managers in manufacturing be equipped with to recognize and address mental health challenges while maintaining operational efficiency and ensuring safety?
Thanks, Austin. I think training and awareness, mental health first aid is offered by lots of local resources. It'll help you recognize the signs of mental health and communicate effectively and respond appropriately. I think having clear guidelines in the workplace, having your managers know ADA, FMLA, your company policies and safety protocols, It's kind of like being forklift trained. You're certified initially, but you also have to keep up with that certification annually. Having accessible resources available, local resources that can counsel, test, and having access to your like EAPs and wellness initiatives on a desktop in a break room or a locker room. And identifying the safety risks of a mental health crisis and adapting your safety requirements to that.
You know, and Angie, I think something that you bring up as I hear you talk about some ways that people can be more supportive in the workplace is, you know, the word accessible. And, you know, that word is kind of falling out of fashion right now. But one of the important things, again, is when you think about the word accessibility and getting people included in that training is really comes from like a corporate waste or a grant waste or wherever you're getting the funding from waste, right? Because like I've literally seen it happen. I had someone that we collaborate with, we do consulting work with, and they bought for their students basically a student wellness program, and it was digital, and they spent $80,000 on it, and it was supposed to be that the students could access it, you know, whenever they wanted to. However, the accessibility was like in a public space, right? And so what really happened is that they spent $80,000 for a dust collector because no one ever used the program, not once in a year. So really, you know, think of it less about treating people special or making special accommodations for everyone, and thinking of it more as, you know, when you put money into training or you put money into resources, my goodness, make them so that they are used.
Thank you both. That gives us a lot to think about. I appreciate your focus, Angie, on proactive training, access, and awareness. I actually took mental health first aid training myself, and I found it to be incredibly helpful in understanding how to recognize and respond to mental health challenges in the workplace. Ryan, let's look at this from a team perspective. How do neurological differences influence the way people think, work, and contribute to teams? Before you begin, I want to note that the packet you received includes the chart Ryan will be referring to in his answer. Feel free to reference it as he speaks.
Thank you, Austin. That's a wonderful question because as a team, we all have to learn to work together because we all think differently, we learn differently, act differently. And seeing these neurodivergences in the workplace can be visible, they can be invisible, but noticing them and being able to create a cohesive work environment is what is strived for. So making these accommodations for the individual could lead to a more cohesive workplace. If you give them certain accommodations, they could strive, whereas if they didn't have that accommodation, they could falter, and that could look to you as possibly a problem employee or an employee that's not going to excel in the workplace. Whereas if you include everybody as a team and have that conversation piece, that this has to be an issue that's seen, then that could lead to a cohesive workplace and an excelling business.
You know, Ryan, I know that you have like a lot of experience on teams. Is there anything you've seen like in that personal experience or as a clinician that really is like the underlying factor to success in like team environment and supporting people? Like what is that?
Yes, Jessica, thank you. I've really seen this in my own personal experience as a worker, that the conversation has to start at onboarding. Because without having that one-on-one discussion with your prospective employee, you won't know what their needs are beforehand. And they might show in the workplace and be perceived as negative behaviors rather than something that they need help with and assistance with to excel in working.
That was great. That perspective really helps us see the bigger picture. As someone who's neurodivergent myself, I truly appreciate how you highlighted the unique strengths neurodivergent individuals bring to teams and the ways inclusion benefits everyone. Jessica, as a leader, you often have to navigate these dynamics. How do you tell the difference between a problem employee and someone who has a mental health or neurodivergence related challenge?
That's a really great question, and one of the reasons that is one of the questions is because we get that a lot. You know, one of the things that to keep in mind is, you know, this is like a multi-step process, and when you have a system for that, process, this becomes a very easy thing to do. So first, it kind of starts with what Ryan talked about, which is starting with onboarding, having yourself, your leaders, and employees trained, right? So maybe that's mental health first aid training. Maybe that's a neurodivergence training, right? But training around the human condition and how to handle mental health and neurological things in the workplace, right? So first you have that. And then once you have that type of education, people, the whole idea behind those is for you to feel confident, for you to say, now I know what that means. Now I know how to have the conversation. So now with your knowledge and your confidence, you can address the employee or the student or the person and ask like, hey, what's going on, right? And offer that kind of support and do so in a way that's empathetic. And then once they identify that, yeah, maybe there is some supports I could use, then you can connect them to resources. And again, resources need to be accessible and easy for people to get to, so that a way that they actually utilize them. Then the last part is, monitoring that, right? So at the end of the day, one might say that it doesn't really matter if someone has a mental health challenge or a neurological challenge or no challenge at all. If you offer an employee supports to improve their performance in the workplace and they choose not to do it, the support not working is a different issue, but if they choose not to do that or don't make changes in the behavior or their productivity, then you have a problem employee, right? Like somebody can have a mental health challenge and be a problem employee. You could be a neurological challenge and be a problem employee. You can have nothing wrong at all and you're still a problem employee. So really it's on the follow through, right? So you address it, you give them support, and then you monitor the situation.
That was really great. That really ties together the importance of leadership and understanding individual needs. Before we continue, let's take a moment to reflect on the key points from this round. Ashley clarified the difference between neurodivergence and mental health conditions, emphasizing that neurodivergence is a natural variation in how the brain functions, while mental health conditions often require treatment. Angie outlined the importance of training and accessible resources for managers, including mental health first aid, company policy awareness, and tools like employee assistance programs. Ryan explained how neurological differences influence how individuals contribute to teams, bring unique strengths such as a creative problem solving and innovative thinking. Jessica shared leadership strategies for distinguishing between performance issues and challenges related to the mental health or neurodivergence, emphasizing the value of understanding the individual needs. Now let's move into our second round of questions. Ashley, let's expand on your earlier points. What conditions or traits are included under the umbrella of neurodiversity, and how broad is its scope?
Thank you, Austin. So right now it's estimated that 15 to 30% of our global population is neurodivergent, and I imagine over the next 5 to 10 years we'll really see that grow as we continue to learn more about it. Some of the conditions that encompass that neurodivergent umbrella are commonly known ones like autism spectrum disorder and ADHD, but then also things like dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, and Tourette's syndrome. And I think that we will continue to see this rise because, as most of you know, with trauma, up until like 20 years ago, we didn't know that trauma was anything other than like war-torn veterans. And now we know that 70% of the population have experienced trauma at least once in their life. So much like with what we learned through research with trauma, we're kind of finding out with neurodivergence. It's here and it's growing, and we're only going to see more of it.
Yeah, and it reminds me of your comment about trauma. And it's like when you hear 7 out of 10 adults have had childhood or adult trauma at some point in their life, it reminds me of the neurological challenges and the mental health challenges too. Those numbers are high, but it doesn't mean that that's the number of people, the percentage that need some sort of support, right? Like neurological conditions are such a huge umbrella. For example, like migraines, that's a form of a neurological issue, right? But it doesn't mean that it necessarily impacts your work, or maybe it does. So just like trauma, just like anxiety, just like any of these things, how much they impact you is on a case-by-case basis. I mean, you could have somebody who has anxiety that doesn't interfere with the workplace, and other people that anxiety stops them from going to the workplace. So that's a key factor too, is first identifying it and then figuring out what supports are needed, because it's pretty widespread.
And I think also something to think about, like we're talking about all these need for supports, and I think it kind of like puts a negative connotation, but neurodivergence does bring a lot to the workplace. They're, creative problem solving. When we look at neurodivergence, we look at people like Walt Disney and Einstein. And so, there's brilliance in neurodivergence. It's just really learning how to like harness that and support it.
I think Bill Gates recently said he thought he would be diagnosed today if he had been assessed back then. And so that's very interesting that, it is in there. And then the support place too is, right, like when you figure out how people can work better, then you can help their productivity. I had read a stat recently that was like, people with, like autism is usually what they're talking about when they say neurodivergence, but like with autism, they are oftentimes, in the right supportive environment, 90% more productive than someone who's not, because their brain just works in a slightly different way. And figuring out what that way is. I think at one point Ryan had told me one about like repetitive behavior. I don't know if you could kind of talk about it. You had a really great example the other day when we were talking.
So this can come up in the workplace with behaviors. Repetitive behaviors can be thought of as, not showing up to work or creating an issue in the workplace. But with these repetitive behaviors, if they become more comfortable with their role in the company, they'll follow these roles and hone in on that task and excel in that task. This is common in ADHD, where they could be hyper-focused on a task. And even though it might seem like you'd like them to multitask and carry several tasks at once, if they're hyper-focused on that task, you can be ensured that they'll excel at that task and promote growth in the company.
So it's like where maybe someone without neurodivergence might be going around and clicking everywhere on the computer and doing this and doing that and doing this. Someone else with ADHD might be like, that is too scattered for me. I need to focus on one thing. And that strength there's a strength in that, in working differently, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna focus, and it'll be done thoroughly from one end to the other. So I think that's kind of what you're saying, right?
Yes, and sometimes even this focus could be not severe, but so focused that the world escapes them, and they could just focus on that task and meet that deadline.
Thank you all, that was really great. That's incredible actually to hear that 15 to 30% of the global population is neurodivergent, and that as more research comes out, this number is expected to grow. It really puts in perspective how important it is to recognize and support neurodivergent individuals in the workplace. The unique traits they can bring can be a tremendous asset when inclusion and understanding are prioritized. Ryan, let's talk about potential challenges. How do you notice conflict in the workplace due to neurodiversity, and how can a resolution be reached?
I've actually experienced this myself, Austin, so thank you for this wonderful question. I've experienced conflict because having a learning disability, I do have a tendency to have difficulty taking on new tasks and learning a new job. So this is why having that conversation during onboarding is important. Because when I was being onboarded, I had a trainer who did not see my neurodiversity, and she expressed that frustration daily with me. And this is at that point where I wish that my lead at the time would have brought my trainer aside, had the conversation, and even during the onboarding process, had that mental health training to make sure that they're aware that neurodiversity is here and to stay, and that it needs to be addressed.
That was awesome, thank you, Ryan. That perspective really highlights the importance of communication. Communication really is the key to fostering positive and collaborative environments. Angie, let's focus on a proactive organizational strategies. How can manufacturing organizations implement flexible accommodations and proactive mental health initiatives that are tailored to diverse roles, such as office staff and shift-based operators?
Thanks, Austin. I think role-specific flexibility and what that looks like in an office setting might look like coming in later on Tuesdays and staying later on Tuesdays versus what it looks like in an operations, if you're a machine operator or out on the floor, that looks like maybe going to an off shift, like second or third shift, and because there's less management, less distractions, less people in general, You're not changing, Brian brought this up the other day, you're not changing their workload, you're changing their environment. It a lot of times has to do with that. So anonymous support systems, again, having local testing, consulting, and counseling availability and accessibility, we reiterate, sorry. And proactive culture, having your managers trained and modeling that proactive culture, collaboration and feedback with your HR, so you could have surveys put out that are anonymous, and so that you get that feedback from your ever-changing workforce, because it's always changing.
Yeah, and when you said surveys, my thought when you said that was anonymous, right? Anonymous surveys. And I think that's really important too. I mean, best practice in that realm would really, if you have the budget to afford it, would be an outside company to come do that and speak to people in a private way, right? Because, when you, staff don't really talk to you if they feel like it's not going to be anonymous, right? One of the things that's a rule of thumb just in, the corporate setting in general is the higher up the ladder you are, the less you know about your staff, the more removed you are. I mean, people on a manufacturing floor, even nurses, when I worked in the ER, nurses don't really want to see the management, right? Like, that's not something that people are looking forward to. So, no, then they're also not going to tell you working here sucks, not directly, right? So if you really want to find out, I mean, best practice would be to find a way for them to vent and be honest about it in a way that feels safe. Ryan, can you share that quip you shared with us the other day about the survey your workplace? He has another place he works at. Go ahead.
So at my workplace, they do have a survey that we take every year, maybe every 2 years, that they always stress is anonymous. But when we have to take that survey, they have us sign on with our employee ID and password.
So anonymous.
So that kind of takes the feeling of anonymity out of the workplace.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I would almost feel like my intelligence is insulted too. Like,
That was incredible. Thank you, guys. Angie, your insights on flexibility and collaboration really stand out. I love how you tied the flexibility and collaboration to meaningful change across different roles. Jessica, let's tackle a leadership challenge. Regarding training myself or my staff, who's qualified? How do I tell the difference between evidence-based, impactful training versus fluff and a waste of money?
that's a really great question because, as you guys know, with so many things that are now go viral and trend in the internet, it's harder to find good training. And there's a lot of stuff out there that's kind of junk. What's interesting about it is like when you talk about like legalities and ethics and staying in your lane around this scope, if you're talking to somebody one-on-one, like if I'm talking to Austin one-on-one about his mental health or his neurodiversity, or trying to help him with that, you should probably be a licensed therapist of some sort, right? Because you're kind of playing with fire. There's laws that are like, counselors and therapists, those are protected titles. You're not supposed to be working with people in a way that's unlicensed around mental health, right? So you need to be careful around that. But what's interesting is that when you shift to a room and you say, I'm going to say to everyone in generalities, you don't have to have a license anymore. But, it kind of reminds me of, your high school, any high school class you took, right? Like, consider the source. Where are you getting this information from? Who's saying it? What is their training? Where did they go to school? Are they qualified in this? I think some of the things that can be difficult in this arena is that, people can put whatever they want on a business card. It doesn't mean that they're qualified, right? And so as considering the source is first a huge thing. And then second is like, where is the credentialing from? For example, Mental Health First Aid is its own organization, its own nonprofit, and in order to teach Mental Health First Aid, to be a certified teacher and to use the material, you have to go through their training. You have to certify. You have to have so many participants per year or you don't get to do it. And they have their own like ISO rigorous certification to go through, right? But you really want to figure that out because certification should mean something. There should be a regulatory body over that certification. So like when we're talking CEUs for medical staff, right? Like that is going to be like the American Pediatrics Association oversees that. The National Board of Counselors oversees that, right? If you're talking about professional development units for a school, you're talking about the Regional Office of Education or the Board of Education, right? They oversee that. Unfortunately, in human resources, there is no requirement. I mean, people can get the SHRM, which is like the Society for Human Resource Management certification and the credentialing, and you have to like get that in order to still say that you have that, but it's not a regulated industry with a license and you better do these things. So it's kind of loose and fast. The other day I saw somebody, I was just kind of looking around to see what resources there were, and I saw somebody who was offering like a neurological certificate, and I started looking into her thing, and it was like just a lady with a website who came up with her own, like she just certified herself. So I don't really, really consider the source and figure out like what is their training, do they really know what they're talking about, type of thing. That's how I would determine between that. I mean, and you even see it like, one of the reasons it's also really important too is that you want to make sure you're getting really good information about it. I mean, one of the things that we started seeing in 2022 across the nation, because we consult with outpatient practices across the nation, is that TikTok started really taking control of people's like opinions about medical stuff. In fact, I attended a forum not a month ago that was talking about like 80% of Gen Zers, the first thing when they're looking for something, they use TikTok to like Google what's wrong. Why do I have a migraine? They TikTok that. I remember when we did WebMD and we were all gonna die of cancer, right? But now everybody has like every condition. And so, I mean, I think people mean well because when you get a diagnosis, you can maybe make more sense of your life. But a lot of people are just misdiagnosed or self-diagnosed, right? And so the training is so important and the collaboration is so important with people on the outside of your business, like people who are licensed or know what they're doing, because that self-diagnosis is sometimes where there's an issue.
Thank you very much. That's a really important point. Knowing how to distinguish between meaningful training and ineffective programs can make a huge difference in a workplace's education. Let me go ahead and summarize the points from this round. Ashley gave us a comprehensive overview of neurodiversity, highlighting conditions such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and others. Ryan provided insight into how managers, despite not having a clinical background, can recognize visible signs of neurodivergent behaviors. He emphasized the importance of awareness, observation, and creating supportive strategies to help neurodivergent employees thrive in the workplace. Angie discussed how manufacturing organizations can tailor accommodations for diverse roles, offering flexibility for office staff and shift-based operators. Jessica provided actionable advice for leaders on verifying claims thoughtfully and professionally. Now we would like to hear from you. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and we'll go ahead and direct them to who you would like.
Go ahead.
You know, it seems to me that really helping people understand that those that have 504s, I mean, every one of these would fit in that federal law, fully are educated themselves on how to use it rather than to avoid using it. I was talking with someone the other day, and this person, it strikes me, even with the diagnosis you met, very bright, but having some neurodivergent issues. And there's a way to let your employer know that's where you are, to work together with them, as you say, to collaborate. Do you find people are more educated to be forthright about those issues for them?
Yeah, on both ends. I mean, like what you're saying, like client advocacy, making sure they know that they have a right to those services. They are protected by the ADA or FERPA or OSHA or your favorite regulatory body. But yeah, to your point, I mean, the education is needed. And it's like people who feel like they have been trained are 80% more likely to stay at their workplace than when they feel like they're freaked out, they know what to do. And kind of going back to like, asking about that, finding out what's going on. I mean, you have a right as an employer or as an institution to ask for proof, to say like, hey, I understand you're saying that you have autism or you have ADHD, like, can I get some like verification of that, right? But sometimes that, Maria, like to your point, it freaks people out, not having the training. Having the training makes a big difference because people feel a lot more empowered to ask questions and feel like, hey, I'm not gonna get sued, I'm not gonna hurt anyone. But that doesn't stop people from still feeling nervous. I mean, and that's, a lot of times the consulting that we do for businesses and schools, that is the primary reason. Because, for example, like I was saying in 2000, 2022, we started seeing an uptick. By 2023, I had a school coming to us and saying like, hey, we have a whole bunch of kids that say they have autism and they need supports, but we're not really like sure. And in fact, we're a little worried because some of them feel like they just don't want to do their homework. Like they just want to bring a book and tests. And so they're coming in and they're saying, I have autism. It's more than we've ever had in any other year. We don't know why. And then they, like most of the requests are, can I bring my book and pen? It just feels like they don't really, right? And so like, what are we supposed to do? We don't want to call them out. We don't want to write. And so then that's why we came in, because they asked us like, what could you do about that? Well, I'm a clinician, Ashley's a clinician. So we have the ability to actually test people and then have that conversation. So then we were able to say like, you know, you, Scott, you are affected with autism and these are some supports, and then let's go to the school together and let me help you articulate that. And you, Susan, you know, I know it felt like that, but it's actually like you have some unresolved trauma. And so maybe you need something different, like getting people to the right doors. And then the other thing that employers can do around that, especially small employers, is really like collaborate with a place, like find counseling agencies or find consultants, find people that will help you help your staff. And this is why I mean, because when you, as you know, if you're a business owner, if you don't have 50, I believe it's 50 W-2 employees, you don't have to provide health insurance, right? And even when you do provide health insurance, mental health coverage is expensive, and a lot of plans offer the option to not let you include it, so it's very common. And students, like a lot of students, and a lot of people in general, there's a donut hole, right? Where, that's what I call it, where on the outside of it is people who have enough money for private healthcare insurance. On the other side of it is the people who don't have enough, so they have Medicaid, so they're covered. In the middle is people who don't have either. And we see that all the time. We see that in young people. Mom and dad, I'm on their stuff and they make too much and we can't afford the health insurance, but they make too much, I can't get Medicaid. So even when you come to them or your employee and you don't offer them health insurance because you just can't afford it, and you say, I think you need to get testing. I mean, without health insurance, that testing could be $1,500 to $2,000. So you got to work with other people so you can connect that. And there's nothing that stops you from paying that for somebody. You know, yes, there's confidentiality. And no one is saying your employee needs to sign off on you accessing their medical records. But, you know, it kind of reminds me of ComEd. I mean, you know, they won't tell you your neighbor's information, but if you call to make a payment, they'll let you. So, you know, you can set it up to be like, my employee needs to come in and I'm just paying the bill, right? And then that employee can work with you if they want to. What's even better practice would be trying to collaborate in such a way in that you're able to work together, like I was talking about with the school. So that became like, I did the testing for the students. Me and the student would talk about what did the testing look like? What do you need? And now, is it okay with you? And it was, can I come with you? And to Maria's point, and advocate for you to the disability office what you might need? I absolutely would love that help. So that's, you know, a great way to kind of educate and empower everyone. The people who are doing the care, the people who are screening, the people who need the care, and the people who are just pointed in the wrong direction and just need something different besides neurodiverse or mental health support. Sorry, so long-winded.
Up front.
So I work for Mercy Housing. We're a non-for-profit affordable housing provider, and Mercy sure loves surveys. Like, we burden our residents with surveys, we burden our staff with surveys, and feedback I've heard is, I don't even want to do this survey because nothing's done about it. Like, you want my opinion, but then I don't see the results. What are you doing to take my feedback and put that into practice with what we're saying? So what's best practice when it comes to administering surveys and ensuring that there's follow through with the feedback you're receiving?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, do you feel like the surveys aren't doing any actionable steps from leadership, or are the people taking the surveys not able to connect that it is happening? Okay.
Like, some of our surveys, I feel like we will take some actionable steps, but then like leadership isn't transparent with what's happening. And then we need to be able to share what is happening, and that these are, and it could take a long time, like to put policies into practice with the feedback we've received. So just being more transparent on what they're doing and how we're trying to change our workplace culture or enhance a more positive working experience or living environment for our residents and staff.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that, because as you're saying that, I'm thinking to myself, transparency, right? And I think that's, you know, a big shift, like outside of mental health trends that we're seeing in the workplace is, I mean, just to kind of rewind, is if you think about how Gen Z and not Gen X, but Gen Z, 30% of Gen Z is estranged from their parents. They don't want to talk to their parents ever again, that's what they say. Why? Well, because they feel like their parents, mislead them, don't respect them, won't apologize, don't care about their feelings, right? Okay, so we have that, and that's changed. I've seen it change in the I've seen it change in the family environment. Fast forward today, and what I see is it's coming to employments. Now people will kind of do the same thing, but they'll do it on LinkedIn, and they will talk about what a horrible toxic boss you are, right? Or horrible this place is to work with. And a lot of those things, they're actually kind of the same overlap. It's a feeling of, you don't tell me everything that's going on. There's no transparency. You don't care about my feelings, and you won't apologize, right? And so, in what you're describing, my thought is like the same thing in the work environment is the transparency. Like, having conversations with staff, especially like, if you're Gen X, I feel like my generation, Gen X, we were all taught not to trust the man. And so as an employee, you're gonna have to earn my trust. And the way to do that is with transparency. And if I'm a client, the way you earn my trust is with transparency. And so I wonder if there's some way for leadership to make, even infographics can really help people like put together a visual of being able to connect it. Like, remember when we gave you the survey asking about these 5 things? This is where we can start to see that, because sometimes people can't see that. Like, an example that comes to mind is I think about how we were trying to change the sliding scale stuff at a nonprofit mental health practice, and so it was like, how are we going to do that? Because we want to help more people, and that's what everybody said. I want to help more people, right? And that's what the staff said. We want to help more. We want more charitable cases. So when we did all the changes, what happened for a temporary time is we had less cases, and the staff said, wait, we wanted to help more people. Why do I have less charitable cases? Right, so I have to communicate that. And the answer is, and we led people through it, was because the first step is we have to find out who needs the charitable care. We have to ask them to qualify. We haven't asked anybody to prove anything. So now we're gonna ask people, and we did. And we found out a lot of people actually have the money and they just don't wanna pay for it. So we've asked them to no longer take the sliding scale. Now that we've cleared that up, our books are now open. And we're gonna start advertising and marketing for, we have free appointments. And now your books will fill, right? But at first, if I hadn't communicated that, they would be like, you kicked everybody off. I thought I was here to help, right? So I wonder if the transparency conversation can help. I hope that is helpful.
Yeah, I love the.
It sounds like you already know, though.
This is awesome. I'm gonna bring that to the team. The infographics is a great idea.
Yeah, I think that helps people really visualize where it went.
Thanks.
Next question.
So in the vein of thinking about young employees that are using the TikTok to self-diagnose, right? They're ticking and talking. And now they come to a workplace and have applied, they've earned the opportunity, and now they're in onboarding and they're making these claims that, oh, I have some dyslexia and also ADHD, and sometimes I can show signs of autism, right? Like, I work with young people that have said things like this. And they're being, they're following this expected plan. The employer is sitting there being like, great, we're doing this during onboarding. But now the employer thinks, oh, I should ask for some evidence about these diagnoses. And these young people, or anyone, right, says, well, I've never been formally diagnosed. These are things that I've noticed about myself. These are my trends. And the employer then, maybe they've already done their due diligence and they have these opportunities and options for, here's some ways to get tested and things. But these young people are like, no, I don't want to do that, right? I don't feel comfortable. That makes me feel weary. How does the company then avoid discrimination issues if the employment doesn't work out or it doesn't feel like a good fit, and then this young person kind of feels that that was discrimination against them for something that wasn't formally diagnosed?
Yeah, I mean, Ashley can probably comment on the propensity for that kind of stuff to happen from an employee. And I think that maybe my answer will probably be a little different, because Ashley's going to give you, and I want you to give an answer that's more of a clinical response. But from a business response, my response is that you have a right to ask for it, and to tell them that the workplace accommodations can really only be for people that really need them, and we need to have proof of that. And I'm sorry that you don't want to get diagnosed, but that's something that does need to happen. But I understand how scary that is. That is why a lot of times people end up getting outside help is because of the fear of it. But then the thing is like if you get the right kind of outside help, you get someone who's a clinician, then they can say it. They can say it. So go ahead, Ashley, tell us about how you tell people,
Well, I think just like gently saying, well, we have these accommodations, but if anybody can just say, I have this, then we're giving support to everyone, and people that actually need it, it's taking away from them. So to gently say that, like, we have to have some sort of documentation. It's not against the law. You would have to prove it if you have a support animal, if you, if you want a pet in your house and you're using that as an ESA, you have to provide documentation. You have, clients come to us all the time asking for those things, and you have to provide it. Otherwise, you don't get those services. And
yeah, I mean, and when the schools, when we've collaborated with schools that haven't done this kind of like a cleanup crew thing, the way that they tend to approach it is, hey, we want you, of course, to have all the supports you need. I'm not a clinician in that, but you know what? We work with an outside place, and they are. And you know what they're going to do? They're going to meet with you one-on-one, and they're going to help us come up with the very best thing you need. And then when they come and sit with us, I can say, oh my gosh, you do need those things. Or, oh, you know what? You might be really relieved to find out you do not have a neurological condition. Isn't that good? That is a positive thing. But that doesn't mean that you're not struggling in the workplace. And I'm sure that you've noticed this. There is an issue with people under 30, and that issue is less about, I think, neurodivergence and more about, I don't know how to come to work. And it's widespread. I mean, I was at an economic forum in January with the Executives Club, and they had Terry Savage there. And I've seen these kids under 30, they go into the basement and they never come back. And I thought it was just a few of my friends that I knew that have kids the same age, right? No, it was shocking to go to an economic forum that is supposed to be about lumber and tariffs and stock prices. And Terry Savage gets up there and says, another thing that might throw our economy is, we got 30% of these kids that went to the basement and never came out. If they come out and start being productive and pursuing their goals, we don't know what will happen to the economy. If they never come out, we don't know what will happen with the economy. We don't know what to do with this. So there is definitely, I don't know how to come to work. So yeah, it's kind of, definitely a scary thing to navigate and not get hurt, not have hurt feelings, not get, sued or threatened of that.
Right here in the middle.
Kind of dovetailing on that, how do you reasonably navigate like the parameters of accommodations? So if someone says, I have ADHD, I struggle with being on time, I struggle with task management in the morning, getting myself out the door. So you come up with a plan that seems like a reasonable accommodation, allowing a flex schedule, or it's okay if, you're 15, 20 minutes late. But then 3 weeks later, that time gets extended, and then the accommodations that are being asked might just not fit into the realm of your organization, and you might reasonably not be able to accommodate those extended requests. How do you handle that, or how do you maybe rein it in better in the beginning when it starts to veer to a space that just might be a little out of control?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. That does happen, like a slippage, And so, even if they have neurological issues that you're supporting, they can still be on a performance plan. They can still be let go for not following that or not following through. I think that what's scary about that, as you know, is what kind of reaction are they going to say that it's my disability type of thing? And so you're really kind of having all your ducks in a row of like, first documentation, are you really affected? Two, these supports. Sometimes that outside help can help, because I've definitely seen that. I mean, I've had people come to me and say like, hey, I need to be late to work every day. And we get talking about it. I'm like, right, because you just want to get your Starbucks and you don't leave early enough. This has nothing to do with your ADHD. This is a time management issue. You know what I mean? And so sometimes it's hard to be the person to say that. But if you put together a plan and say like, I need this type of markers of success, and if that doesn't happen, then I don't know that you can continue working here. I hope that's helpful. I know that those behaviors oftentimes, I mean, like what you're seeing, we hear a lot of that, like a lot of like everybody wants supports, people call in sick or call in late, or they have, there was always some kind of medical issue of why they can't perform, and a lot of it feels like not taking personal accountability. Something that, you know, also can help in that is like, because I'm taking this from a perspective of there may or may not be this other issue, but we have a problem with productivity, and for whatever reason this person's not coming to work, right? And so my thought is like outside of that is how can you make this position, if you wanted to keep them, let's say, and we're kind of going down this path, what can you do to make this position revitalized for them? Like, what is it they see here? Like, a lot of times people don't come to work and don't engage at work and don't care because they see no hope. You know, what they see is like, I'm never gonna, what's after this? Nothing. Like, what am I gonna make after this? I'm never gonna buy a house. I'm never gonna succeed. I can't even afford the basic Hulu package, right? So then they just drop out. And so it's like, you know, what can happen in the workplace that they feel like, I'm working here for a bigger cause. This is going somewhere. My life means something here, right? And sometimes figuring out what that is and offering them ways to either retrain or pivot into things that they do like can help them say, now I have a reason to come to work. I'm going somewhere. So sometimes that can help. And the ways that that can be done from the top down is like, you know, peer advising, peer mentorship, having someone like them in the agency even that they look up to, and can they mentor them? Can they inspire them? A lot of people, like even when you think about bad financial habits, studies show that like somebody who has bad financial habits and they hang out with a friend that has excellent financial habits, just observing their friend be financially responsible can change someone's habits. So if you can pair them with someone who's excited to come to work, they might start to feel that way too.
Questions? All right, I think that wraps it up for today. Thank you guys for having us and joining us for this discussion.